I thought I was buying love in Thailand. Turns out I was just renting out my own heartbreak by the hour. Some mistakes cost you money. Others cost you everything you thought you knew about yourself. This one cost me both. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our longtime viewers who wanted other expats to learn from his costly mistake. My name is Hamish Mackenzie, and I'm 62 years old. I spent 37 years as a civil engineer in Aberdeen before. My wife Margaret decided she preferred her yoga instructor to her husband. The divorce took half my pension and most of my dignity. I wasn't bitter, just empty. Scotland felt cold and grey, not just the weather but everything about it. My solicitor suggested I take some time abroad, maybe find myself again. "You're not dead yet, Hamish," he said. "Go live a little." So I did what every broken Scottish man does when he needs to feel alive again. I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. I landed in Phuket with my pension, my savings, and absolutely no plan, beyond drinking cheap beer and feeling sorry for myself. The first month I stayed in a guest house near Patong Beach, watching younger men with Thai girls half their age. I told myself I wasn't that pathetic. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. It was during my second month that I met Waruni at a beachside bar in Qatar. She wasn't working there, just having a drink after finishing her shift at a hotel nearby. She spoke excellent English, had this quiet way about her that felt different from the bar scene chaos. "You look sad," she said, sitting beside me without invitation. Scottish men always look sad when they're far from home. "How do you know?" "I'm Scottish," I asked, genuinely curious. Most Thai people assumed I was English or Australian. "My ex-boyfriend was from Edinburgh," she said, ordering a Singer beer. "He taught me to recognize the accent. Also taught me Scottish men are loyal, but stubborn." "Are you stubborn, Hamish?" I never told her my name. She'd overheard the bartender, but the way she said it with this gentle smile made me feel seen for the first time in months. We talked until the bar closed. She told me she'd lost her job. As a hotel receptionist during COVID, had been struggling to find steady work ever since. Her English was so good because she'd studied hospitality management before the pandemic destroyed tourism. I told her about Margaret, about Aberdeen, about feeling invisible in my own life. She listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions. When I offered to buy her dinner the next night, she accepted but insisted on splitting the bill. "I'm not a charity case," she said, but not meanly. "I just like your company." 3 weeks of dinners, beach walks, and honest conversations later, I was completely smitten. Warren made me feel interesting again, attractive even. She'd laugh at my stories about engineering disasters, ask about Scotland like she genuinely wanted to visit someday. "Maybe after I get back on my feet financially," she'd say. "I'd love to see where you come from." I started thinking about staying in Thailand permanently. The weather was better, the cost of living lower, and most importantly, there was Waruni. When I mentioned looking at condos for sale, she got excited. "Really? You'd stay here with me?" The hope in her voice convinced me. I started condo hunting the next day. The place I found was perfect. 2 bedrooms, ocean view from the balcony, modern kitchen, all the amenities an expat could want. It cost most of my savings, but I rationalized it as an investment in my future. Happiness. Waruni helped me negotiate with the seller, translated documents, made sure I wasn't getting cheated. "I want you to be happy here," she said. "This feels like home already, doesn't it?" When the papers were signed and I had the keys, she moved in naturally. We never discussed it formally. It just happened. One day she had her own place. Next, her clothes were in my closet and her shampoo in my shower. I loved it. For the first time since my divorce, I felt like I was part of something again. We settled into domestic bliss quickly. Waruni cooked traditional Thai dishes, taught me basic phrases, introduced me to her friends as her boyfriend with obvious pride. I helped her apply for jobs, used my connections to recommend her to hotel managers I'd met. We talked about the future openly. "I want to work again," she said. "But it's nice having someone who believes in me. Margaret never believed in you, did she?" She was right. Margaret had spent our last years together making me feel like a failure, like I wasn't ambitious enough or interesting enough. Waruni made me feel valuable again. When my father got sick, and I needed to return to Scotland for what we thought might be his final weeks, leaving her felt impossible. "How long will you be gone?" she asked, helping me pack. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Depends on his condition. I hate leaving you alone. "I'll be fine," she said, kissing my forehead. "This is your home now. I'll take care of it while you're away. Take care of your father. Family is important." I gave her access to my local bank account for groceries and emergencies, left her money for utilities and anything she might need. "Don't spend it all on shoes," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. She laughed, but I caught something in her expression I couldn't quite read. "I love you, Hamish. Come, back to me safe." Those words carried me through the flight to Aberdeen, through the sterile hospital rooms and difficult conversations with doctors. My father recovered better than expected, which should have made me happy. Instead, I just wanted to get back. To Waruni, to the life we were building together in our perfect condo overlooking the Andaman Sea. I decided to surprise her by coming back 3 days early. The flight connections worked out perfectly, and I was excited to see her face when I walked through the door unexpectedly. Maybe we could celebrate my father's recovery with a nice dinner, or just spend the afternoon on our balcony watching the sunset like we used to. I took a taxi from the airport, practically bouncing in my seat with anticipation. The driver tried making conversation, but I was too focused on getting home to my girlfriend, to my new life. "Your first time in Phuket?" he asked. "No," I said, grinning. "I live here now. My girlfriend's waiting for me." He nodded approvingly. "Thai girlfriend? You're lucky, man. Thai women take good care of foreign husband." I thought about correcting him about the husband part, but decided I liked how it sounded. Walking into the condo building, I noticed more motorbikes parked outside than usual, but didn't think much of it. Tourist season was picking up. The lobby seemed busier too, more foot traffic, people I didn't recognize coming and going. I nodded to the security guard, who looked at me strangely but said nothing. Maybe he didn't recognize me after being away for weeks. I took the elevator to my floor, fishing for my keys, imagining Waruni's surprise when I walked through the door. I could hear voices in the hallway, laughter, the sound of doors opening and closing. Busy building today, I thought. Good for property values. I put my key in the lock and turned it quietly, wanting to maintain the surprise. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The furniture was rearranged. My living room looked different, more like a hotel lobby than a home. There were men's shoes by the door that weren't mine, jackets hanging on chairs, the smell of unfamiliar cologne mixed with something else I couldn't identify. My heart started racing, but I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Waruni was having friends over. Maybe she'd hosted a party and people had left things behind. I could hear voices coming from deeper in the apartment, from the direction of our bedroom. I moved toward the kitchen, staying quiet, trying to understand what I was walking into. That's when I heard her voice clearly for the first time. But it wasn't the voice I knew. This was businesslike, professional, giving directions. "Room 2 is ready, you can go in now. Cash first, like always, 1 hour, then you need to leave." My blood went cold. I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid to confirm what my brain was telling me. But my heart refused to accept. A man's voice responded in Thai, then English. "Same price as yesterday?" "Same price," Waruni replied. "My boyfriend returns tomorrow, so this is last day for a while. Tell your friends." The casual way she said "my boyfriend," like I was just a scheduling inconvenience, made my stomach turn. I heard the bedroom door close, then sounds that left no doubt about what was happening in my bed, in my home, in the life I thought I was building with the woman I loved. I stood in my own kitchen like an intruder, paralyzed between the need to confront this horror and the desperate hope that I was misunderstanding everything. Maybe she was being coerced. Maybe someone was forcing her to do this. Maybe there was an explanation that would make sense of why my girlfriend was apparently running some kind of prostitution business out of our condo while I was in Scotland, burying what I thought was my father. Another voice in the living room. Next. Waruni again, matter of fact, like she was managing a doctor's office. I heard movement, more cash being exchanged, another bedroom door closing. "Room 2? We only had one bedroom. I realized she must have converted my office space, the room where I kept my engineering books and planned to set up a proper desk. Now it was apparently another venue for whatever business she was running. The betrayal felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it burst. This wasn't desperate circumstances or temporary bad decisions. This was organized, systematic, professional. I don't know how long I stood there listening to my life fall apart in real time. Eventually the sounds stopped. Voices moved toward the front door, and I heard Waruni saying goodbye to her clients like a gracious hostess. "Same time tomorrow?" one asked. "No, not tomorrow. I'll call you when we can resume." The door closed, and suddenly the apartment was quiet except for the sound of my own breathing and the distant hum of the air conditioning. I waited another few minutes, giving myself time to figure out what I was going to say, what I was going to do, how I was going to handle confronting the woman I loved, about turning our home into a brothel while I was away dealing with my dying father. When I finally walked into the living room, Waruni was counting money at our dining table. Thai bills, lots of them, organized in neat stacks like she'd done this many times before. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and her face went completely white. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She just stared at me like she was seeing a ghost, her mouth slightly open, the money still in her hands. "Hamish," she finally whispered, "you're early." It was such an absurd understatement that I almost laughed. Instead, I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. "Yes," I said, my voice barely steady. "I'm early?" She dropped the money and stood up so quickly her chair fell backward. "I can explain. Everything," she said, her voice high and panicked. "It's not what you think. I was forced to do this. I had no choice." But even as she spoke, I could see the printed rate cards on the table behind her. Multiple mobile phones, a notebook with what looked like appointment schedules. This wasn't the setup of someone being coerced. This was a business operation, and I'd been the unwitting landlord and financier. "Forced?" I said, walking closer to the table. "By whom? Who forced you to do this?" "Dangerous men," she said, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "They said they would hurt you, hurt me. If I didn't pay them money I owe. This was the only way I could get enough fast. I was going to stop as soon as you came back. I was going to tell you everything." She reached for me, but I stepped back. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw for physical comfort. "I love you, Hamish. This doesn't change that. I did this for us, to protect us." I picked up one of the rate cards. It was professionally printed, with prices listed for different services, different room options. At the bottom in small print, it advertised luxury foreign accommodation and discreet upscale services. This wasn't some desperate last-minute scheme. This was advertising material for an established business. "How long, Waruni?" I asked, holding up the card. "How long has this been going on?" "Just a few days," she said quickly. "I swear, just since you left. I was so scared, so desperate. They gave me 1 week to pay, or they said they would hurt you when you returned." But the professional quality of the materials, the organized way she'd handled the clients, the fact that she had a system for scheduling multiple rooms, it all suggested this had been happening much longer than a few days. "Please believe me, Hamish. You're the only good thing in my life. I would never hurt you intentionally." "Never hurt me," I said, my voice getting louder despite my intention to stay calm. "You turned our bedroom into a whorehouse. Our home. Waruni, the place where we said we loved each other, where we planned our future. You sold that. You sold us." She was crying harder now, reaching for me again, begging me to understand. "They're dangerous people, Hamish. If I don't pay them, they'll kill us both." This was the only way to get the money fast enough. I thought you would never have to know. The casual way she said that she thought I'd never know, somehow hurt worse than everything else. She hadn't planned to stop because it was wrong. She'd planned to stop because she might get caught. "How much do you owe them?" I asked, though part of me already suspected this entire story was fabricated. 50,000 baht, she said immediately. "I borrowed money before I met you, for my mother's medical treatment. But then the interest kept growing, and they said, if I didn't pay in full, they would hurt the people I care about most. 50,000 baht was about $1,500. Looking at the money stacked on our dining table, she'd made at least that much just today. If this had really been about paying off dangerous lenders, she could have stopped already. But she was still scheduling appointments, still advertising her services, still running what was clearly an ongoing business operation out of my condo. "Show me the threats," I said. "If these men contacted you, show me the messages." She hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. "They don't message, they came here in person, told me face to face. That's how these people work, Hamish. They don't leave evidence." Her story was falling apart, but she was doubling down on it, looking me directly in the eyes as she lied about something so fundamental to our relationship. I realized that everything I thought I knew about this woman, about our love, about our future together, had been an illusion. The Waruni I'd fallen for might have been a complete fabrication, a character she'd created to hook a lonely, vulnerable Scottish man with money and property. "I need time to think," I said, walking toward the bedroom to see what other evidence of her business I might find there. "Don't follow me, don't touch me, just give me space to process this." "Hamish, please don't leave me," she called after me. "If you leave me, I'll have nothing, no one. I'll kill myself, I swear I will. You're my only hope for a real life." Even her emotional manipulation felt calculated now, designed to make me feel responsible for her well-being, instead of angry about her betrayal. But it worked, at least partially. Despite everything, I still loved her, or I loved who I thought she was. The idea of her hurting herself because of my reaction to her betrayal made me feel guilty, which I knew was exactly what she intended. Over the next few days, I started asking questions around the building. Casual conversations with neighbors, the security guard, the building manager. What I discovered made everything so much worse. My condo hadn't been operating as a brothel for a few days or even a few weeks. According to the building manager, there had been complaints about unusual traffic to my unit for over 2 months, dating back to shortly after Waruni moved in. "We thought you knew," he said apologetically. "Many foreign men, they have arrangements like this. We try not to judge, but other residents were complaining about the noise, the strangers coming and going at all hours." 2 months. She'd been planning this almost from the beginning of our relationship. While I was falling in love, planning a future together, thinking about maybe proposing to her someday, she was already setting up a prostitution business in the home I'd bought for us to share. Every "I love you," every conversation about our future, every intimate moment we'd shared had been contaminated by her secret business venture. I felt like an idiot, a walking stereotype of the naive foreign man who gets used by a Thai woman with no conscience. The building manager showed me security footage on his laptop. Date stamps from 6 weeks ago showed multiple men coming and going from my unit while I was out, back when I thought Waruni was spending her days job hunting or relaxing at home. I watched my girlfriend escort strangers into my building, my elevator, my home, with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. "You want to see more?" he asked gently. "There's quite a lot of footage. Some residents were keeping track because they wanted to file complaints." I told him. I'd seen enough, but the damage was done. Every memory I had of our relationship was now tainted by the knowledge that she'd been using me from almost the very beginning. "There's something else," he said, lowering his voice like he was sharing a dangerous secret. "Some of the documentation we have on file for your unit has been updated recently. Changes to the lease terms, additional occupancy permits, business registration paperwork. All signed with your name, but..." He pulled out a folder and showed me documents I'd never seen before. My signature had been forged on papers that essentially made me a partner in whatever business Waruni was running. If the police got involved, if there were legal consequences for operating an illegal prostitution business, I wouldn't just be the naive victim. According to these documents, I was a willing participant, a business partner, potentially the primary person legally responsible. "I never signed these," I said, studying my own forged signature. "I've never seen these documents before in my life." "Many foreign men, they sign papers without understanding," he said diplomatically. "Thai bureaucracy is complicated, easy to make mistakes." But we both knew these weren't mistakes. Waruni had forged my signature on legal documents that could send me to prison. Documents that made me appear to be the organizing force behind an illegal sex business. She hadn't just betrayed our relationship. She'd set me up to take legal responsibility for her crimes. If anything went wrong, if the police got involved, if neighbors filed enough complaints to trigger an investigation, I would be the one facing serious criminal charges, while she could claim to be just an employee. I confronted her that evening when she returned to the condo with groceries, acting like nothing had happened, like we were still just a couple dealing with a temporary crisis. "We need to talk about the documents," I said, showing her the paperwork the building manager had shared with me. Her face went through several expressions quickly: surprise, fear, calculation, then resignation. "I can explain that too," she said, setting down the grocery bags. "The business registration was to protect you, to make sure you couldn't be accused of running an illegal operation without permits. If we had proper paperwork, it would be legal, legitimate. You forged my signature, Waruni. You made me a partner in a prostitution business without my knowledge or consent." "I was trying to protect us both," she insisted, but her voice lacked the conviction it had held during previous explanations. "If the authorities found out, it would be worse for you as the property owner if there was no paperwork. This way, everything looks official, regulated." She was still lying, still trying to manipulate me into believing her version of events. But the evidence was too overwhelming now. The forged documents, the security footage, the testimony from building staff, it all painted a picture of systematic deception that had been planned from almost the moment we met. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked directly. "Since you met me? Since you found out I was buying a condo? Since you moved in?" She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "I loved you, Waruni. I thought we had something real, something worth building a life around. Was any of it real for you, or was I just a convenient mark with property and money?" "It was real," she said, starting to cry again. "My feelings for you are real, but I also have to survive, Hamish. I have debts, family obligations, responsibilities you don't understand. Yes, I saw an opportunity when I met you, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you. I do love you. I just also needed to take care of my problems." At least this felt like partial honesty, admitting that our relationship had been transactional. From her perspective, while maintaining that her emotions were genuine. But it was too little, too late. The trust was completely broken, and I was starting to understand the legal jeopardy I was in. The next morning, I went to see a lawyer. A friend from the expat community had recommended someone who specialized in helping foreigners navigate Thai legal system complications. What I learned in that office made me realize how much trouble I was potentially in. "Prostitution is illegal in Thailand," he explained patiently. "But the penalties for organizing or profiting from prostitution are much more severe than for participating. If you are seen as the business owner, the property owner, and the financial backer, you could face serious prison time." He reviewed the forged documents Waruni had created. "These make you appear to be the primary organizer. Very dangerous for you. But I didn't know anything about it. I was in Scotland when most of this happened." "Proving ignorance is difficult," he said. "You gave her access to your property, your bank account. You put her name on no official documents, but allowed her to act with your authority. From the perspective of Thai law, this looks like a foreign man using a local woman as a front for his illegal business. The penalties for foreigners are especially harsh." He quoted potential sentences that made my blood run cold. Even if I could eventually prove my innocence, the legal process could take years and cost more money than I had left. "My advice is to resolve this quickly and quietly before it becomes a police matter." I returned home to find Waruni packing a suitcase. "Where are you going?" I asked, though part of me was relieved she was leaving voluntarily. "I'm staying with a friend for a few days," she said without looking at me. "Give us both time to think, figure out what happens next." But something about her demeanor felt off. She was packing quickly, efficiently, like someone preparing to disappear rather than take a short break. "Are you coming back?" I asked. She paused in her packing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Do you want me to come back? After everything, do you still want to be with me?" It was a fair question, And I didn't have a good answer. Part of me still loved her, or loved who I thought she was. Part of me wanted to believe her stories about dangerous men and desperate circumstances. But the rational part of my brain knew that staying with her meant accepting that our entire relationship had been built on lies and manipulation. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time to process everything, to understand what's real and what isn't. I'll call you in a few days, she said, continuing to pack. We can talk then when emotions aren't so high. Maybe we can find a way forward. She kissed my cheek on her way out, a gesture that felt both familiar and foreign. After she left, I sat in my condo looking at the evidence of her business operations, rate cards, appointment books, supplies she'd left behind. The space that had felt like home just days before now felt contaminated, ruined by the knowledge of what had happened here, while I was away grieving my father and planning my future with a woman who was using me in ways I was still discovering. I spent the next week trying to understand the full extent of the financial damage. Waruni had access to my local bank account, which I'd given her for household expenses and emergencies. What I discovered when I reviewed the statements made me physically sick. Over the past 2 months, she'd been using my money not just for personal expenses, but for business investments. Professional photography for advertisement, website development, supplies, furniture, even payments to other women who were apparently working for her. My own money had been financing the prostitution business she was running out of my home without my knowledge. The numbers were staggering. She'd spent over $40,000 of my money on her business operations. Money I'd saved over decades of careful engineering work. Money that represented my security and independence. Money I'd trusted her to manage responsibly while I was dealing with my father's health crisis. I'd been unknowingly financing my own betrayal for months. Every dollar spent on advertising her services, every payment to her employees, every business expense had come from my account with my unwitting authorization. But the financial betrayal was just the beginning. I discovered she'd also used my name and credit to secure a lease on a second apartment across town. According to the rental agreement, I was responsible for 6 months of rent on a place I'd never seen, money that would be automatically deducted from my account, regardless of whether the business continued operating. She'd essentially committed me to financing her prostitution operation for months into the future, with or without my participation or knowledge. The legal and financial web she'd created around me was so complex that untangling it would require legal help I couldn't afford. When Waruni called after a week, her tone had changed completely. Gone was the crying, desperate woman who claimed to love me and need my help. This version was businesslike, almost cold. "We need to talk about the arrangements," she said without even asking how I was doing. "There are ongoing commitments that need to be handled." She wanted to meet at a coffee shop, not at home, which felt significant. When I arrived, she was already there with a folder of documents and a calculator, looking like someone preparing for a business negotiation rather than a conversation with her boyfriend about their relationship. "I've been thinking about our situation," she said after ordering coffee. "There's a way we can both benefit from this, but it requires trust and cooperation." She opened her folder and showed me profit statements from her business operations. In 2 months, the business made over $60,000 profit. "Your condo is perfect for this. Upscale, private, professional atmosphere. We could be partners officially, split the profits, make this work for both of us." She was offering to cut me in on the prostitution business she'd been running behind my back, as if discovering her betrayal would naturally lead to me joining her criminal enterprise. "You want me to become your business partner in prostitution?" I asked, making sure I understood correctly. "It's not prostitution," she said, lowering her voice. "It's hospitality services, adult entertainment, companionship. Very high-end, very discreet, very profitable. You provide the location and financial backing, I handle operations and client management. We split profit 60-40, with you taking the larger share since you're taking the bigger risk as the property owner." She was describing this like a legitimate business opportunity, complete with profit-sharing proposals and risk assessments. The transformation from loving girlfriend to criminal business partner was so complete, it felt like I was talking to a different person entirely. "And if I say no?" I asked. Her expression hardened slightly. "Then we have problems. You're already legally committed to the business whether you participate or not. The documents, the lease agreements, the financial records, they all show you as the organizing force behind everything. Walking away now doesn't eliminate your legal exposure, it just eliminates your profit potential." It was a threat disguised as business advice. She was telling me that I could either join her criminal enterprise or face the legal consequences alone. The woman I'd loved, planned a future with, trusted with my heart and my money, was now essentially blackmailing me. "Give me time to think about it," I said, though I already knew my answer. I wasn't going to become a pimp, no matter how elegantly she described the business model. "Don't think too long," she said, closing her folder. "The business has momentum now. Stopping it suddenly would create problems for everyone involved, including you." She left money for her coffee and walked away without a goodbye kiss or even eye contact. Sitting alone in that coffee shop, I realized that the woman I'd fallen in love with had probably never existed. Everything about her, the shyness, the gratitude, the affection, the dreams of our future together, had been a performance designed to manipulate a lonely, vulnerable foreign man into providing her with property, money, and legal cover for her criminal activities. That evening, I called my lawyer again. "She's threatening me," I explained, describing the coffee shop conversation. "She's saying I'm legally committed whether I participate or not, that I can't walk away without facing consequences." He listened carefully and asked several questions about the specific language she'd used. "This sounds like extortion," he said finally. "She's using your legal vulnerability to force your continued participation in illegal activities. This makes your situation more dangerous, but it might also give us leverage if we handle it correctly." He advised me to document everything, record any future conversations if possible, and avoid meeting with her privately. "What if I just leave Thailand?" I asked. "Sell the condo, take whatever money I have left, go back to Scotland?" "Possible," he said, "but risky. If charges are filed while you're gone, you could be arrested if you ever try to return to Thailand or potentially any country with extradition agreements. Also, selling the condo quickly would likely mean losing money, and there may be legal holds placed on your assets if an investigation begins." I was trapped, forced to choose between joining a criminal enterprise or facing potential prison time for a business I'd unknowingly financed but never participated in. The woman I'd trusted with my future had systematically destroyed every avenue of escape. Over the next few days, I noticed I was being watched. Men on motorbikes parked outside my building, the same faces appearing in different locations when I went out for meals or errands. When I mentioned this to building security, they confirmed that people had been asking questions about me, my schedule, my activities. "Maybe connected to business problems," the guard suggested diplomatically. I realized that Warrenese criminal associates were keeping tabs on me, probably to ensure I didn't do anything to disrupt their operations or expose their activities to authorities. The surveillance made everything worse. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, afraid to go out, afraid to stay in, afraid to contact police or embassy officials who might be obligated to investigate the very crimes I was trying to distance myself from. The isolation was crushing. I'd burned bridges with expat friends who now saw me as either a willing participant in prostitution or a pathetic mark who'd been completely manipulated. My family in Scotland was thousands of miles away and wouldn't understand the cultural and legal complexities of my situation. I was completely alone in a foreign country, trapped in legal and financial web I couldn't escape. Then the police came. Not to arrest me, but to investigate complaints from other residents about illegal activities in my building. 2 officers showed up at my door with an interpreter, asking polite but pointed questions about my business activities, my relationship with Waruni, my knowledge of what had been happening in my unit. "We have reports of commercial sex activities," one officer explained through the translator. "Building manager says you are owner. Your girlfriend is operator. We need to understand your involvement." I tried to explain that I'd been an unwitting victim, that I'd discovered everything by accident, that I wanted no part in any illegal activities, but my Thai was limited. The translation was imperfect, and my possession of the business documents made my protestations sound weak. They didn't arrest me that day, but they made it clear that an investigation was underway and that I shouldn't leave Phuket without notifying their office. "Passport?" one officer asked, and I had to surrender it temporarily while they conducted their inquiry. I was effectively under house arrest, unable to leave the country, unable to sell my property, unable to access most of my money because the bank had frozen my accounts pending the investigation. Everything I'd worked for over 40 years of engineering career was locked away, while Thai authorities determined whether I was a criminal mastermind or just an incredibly naive victim. Waruni disappeared completely once the police investigation began. No phone calls, no messages, no sign of her anywhere in Phuket. Her friends claimed not to know where she was, and the address she'd given me for her family turned out to be false. It was like she'd never existed, except for the financial and legal devastation she'd left in her wake. I realized she'd probably done this before, probably had an escape plan ready from the beginning. While I was falling in love and planning our future, she was preparing her exit strategy for when her scheme inevitably collapsed. The lawyer I'd hired turned out to be more expensive and less effective than I'd hoped. Weeks passed with little progress, and his bills consumed what little money I had left access to. "These cases take time," he kept telling me. "Thai legal system is slow but thorough. We must be patient." But patience was a luxury I couldn't afford. Every day the investigation continued was another day I couldn't work, couldn't leave the country, couldn't rebuild my life. The stress was affecting my health, my sleep, my ability to think clearly about options and consequences. 3 months after the investigation began, I was offered a plea agreement. If I pled guilty to reduced charges and agreed to permanent deportation from Thailand, the more serious charges would be dropped and I could avoid prison time. The deal would also require me to forfeit any claims to the condo and remaining Thai assets, essentially leaving the country with nothing but a one-way ticket and whatever clothes I could carry. "It's not justice," my lawyer admitted, "but it's survival. You can start over somewhere else." The alternative was risking a trial where I might face years in Thai prison, even if I was eventually found innocent. I took the plea deal. What choice did I have? On the day I signed the papers, I thought about Waruni, wondering if she was already running the same scheme on another lonely foreign man somewhere else in Thailand. The prosecutor mentioned that she was wanted for questioning in connection with similar cases involving other expat victims, suggesting that I wasn't her first mark and probably wouldn't be her last. "These women are professionals," he said through the translator. "They study foreign men, learn their weaknesses, exploit their loneliness and desire for companionship. You were not the first, will not be the last." The deportation process took another month. During that time, I lived in a cheap guest house near the airport, my movement still restricted, but my passport returned for travel purposes only. I had just enough money left for the flight to Aberdeen, and maybe a few weeks of basic expenses once I arrived. Everything else, my savings, my pension contributions, my condo, my furniture, even my personal belongings, was gone. 40 years of careful financial planning wiped out by 6 months of trusting the wrong woman. The night before my deportation flight, I got a phone call from an unknown number. It was Waruni. "Hamish," she said, her voice small and uncertain, nothing like the cold businesswoman from our last meeting. "I heard about your situation. I wanted to say goodbye." I should have hung up immediately, but I was still desperate for some explanation that would make sense of everything that had happened. "Where are you?" I asked. "Are you safe?" Even after everything she'd done to me, part of me was still concerned about her welfare. "I'm in Bangkok now," she said, "starting over, like you. I'm sorry things ended this way. I never wanted you to get hurt." The casualness of her apology, like she was sorry about bad weather ruining our picnic plans, made me realize how little our relationship had meant to her. "I did care about you, Hamish. Maybe not the way you wanted, but I did care. You were kind to me when I needed kindness." "You destroyed my life," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. You took everything I had and left me to face the consequences alone. I know, she said quietly, but you'll be okay. You're strong, smarter than you think. You'll build something new in Scotland. Maybe this was meant to happen, to teach you something important about trust and love and how the world really works. She was trying to frame my destruction as a learning experience, as if bankrupting and criminalizing me was somehow a favor she'd done for my personal growth. What did you learn? I asked. From all of this, from us, from what you did. What did you learn? There was a long pause. I learned that survival sometimes requires hurting people you care about, she said finally. I learned that love and business don't mix well, and I learned that foreign men always underestimate Thai women. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me, and somehow it hurt worse than all her lies. Goodbye, Hamish. I hope Scotland treats you better than Thailand did. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my cheap guest house room, surrounded by the few possessions I was allowed to take home, thinking about that final conversation. She'd reduced our entire relationship to a business transaction that had gotten complicated by emotions she hadn't planned for. I realized that everything I'd interpreted as love had been performance, everything I'd seen as intimacy had been manipulation, and everything I'd believed about our future together had been delusion. The flight back to Aberdeen was the longest 12 hours of my life. I had no home to return to, having sold my house to buy the Thai condo. My brother had agreed to let me stay in his spare room temporarily, but the shame of having to explain my situation to family was almost unbearable. How do you tell people that you lost everything because you fell in love with a prostitute who turned your home into a brothel while you were away burying your father? How do you explain that level of naivety and poor judgment at age 62? My brother picked me up at the airport, and the drive to his house was mostly silent. He'd heard the basic outline of my story over the phone, but seeing me in person, broke, defeated, carrying everything I owned in 2 suitcases, made the reality of my situation clear. We'll figure it out, he said as we pulled into his driveway. You're alive, you're free, you're home, everything else can be rebuilt. I appreciated his optimism, but I knew rebuilding at my age would be different from starting over as a young man. This wasn't a setback. It was likely the end of my independence and financial security. The hardest part was explaining everything to people who cared about me. My daughter, who lived in London with her own family, was devastated when she learned what had happened. How could you be so stupid, Dad? She asked during our first phone call after I returned. Everyone knows Thai women target older Western men. Everyone knows these relationships are transactional. How could you not see it? Her questions echoed my own self-recriminations, but hearing them from someone I loved made them cut deeper. I thought she was different, I said weakly. She seemed genuine, educated, independent, not like the stereotypes. That's exactly how the smart ones operate, she replied. They study what foreign men want to hear and become exactly that. You fell for the oldest con in Southeast Asia, Dad. I just can't understand how someone as intelligent as you could be so blind. She wasn't wrong, but her disappointment was another loss to add to everything else Warrenie had cost me. Months passed slowly in my brother's spare room. I applied for jobs, but at 62, with a gap in my employment history that I couldn't fully explain, prospects were limited. I eventually found part-time consulting work that paid enough to contribute to household expenses, but not enough to regain independence. The engineering skills I'd developed over decades were still valuable, but my confidence in my judgment about people and situations was completely shattered. I started attending a support group for older men who'd experienced relationship fraud. It was depressing to discover how common my story was, how many intelligent, successful men had been completely devastated by similar schemes. The group leader, a retired accountant who'd lost his savings to a Filipino woman who disappeared after cleaning out his bank accounts, emphasized that these operations were sophisticated criminal enterprises that targeted specific psychological vulnerabilities. They're not random scammers, he explained. They're professionals who study their marks, identify weaknesses, and execute long-term plans designed to extract maximum value while maintaining plausible deniability. Learning about the psychology behind romance scams helped me understand what had happened, but it didn't ease the shame and self-blame. I'd ignored red flags, rationalized inconsistencies, and chosen to believe what I wanted to believe instead of what the evidence clearly showed. My loneliness and desire for companionship after my divorce had made me vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation Waruni specialized in. She'd given me what I needed emotionally, while systematically destroying me financially and legally. Through the support group, I met other men with similar stories. A retired teacher who'd lost his pension to a Vietnamese woman who convinced him to invest in fake businesses. A widowed engineer who'd been bilked out of his life insurance payout by a Filipina who claimed to love him while running credit card scams using his identity. An Australian businessman who'd discovered his Thai wife had been selling drugs out of their Bangkok apartment while he traveled for work. The details varied, but the pattern was consistent. Professional criminals targeting older Western men's emotional needs and financial resources. The worst part, one man shared during a group session, is that part of me still misses her. Even knowing everything she did, part of me still remembers the good times and wonders if any of it was real. Everyone in the room nodded in recognition. That was the most insidious aspect of these schemes. They weren't just financial crimes, but emotional manipulations that left victims questioning their ability to trust their own feelings and perceptions. I realized I wasn't angry at Waruni anymore. Anger required energy I didn't have and implied expectations she'd never intended to meet. She was a criminal who targeted me for reasons that had nothing to do with who I was as a person. Being angry at her was like being angry at a hurricane for destroying your house, pointless and emotionally exhausting. What I felt instead was profound sadness for the life I'd thought I was building and the future I'd imagined that had never really existed outside my own wishful thinking. 2 years after returning to Scotland, I received an unexpected email from a lawyer in Bangkok. Waruni had been arrested in connection with a larger investigation into organized romance fraud targeting foreign nationals. The Thai authorities were seeking victim impact statements for her sentencing hearing. Your case was instrumental in building the prosecution's understanding of her methods, the lawyer wrote. She is facing significant prison time for multiple counts of fraud, forgery and operating illegal businesses. I didn't write a victim impact statement. What would be the point? Waruni going to prison wouldn't return my money, restore my reputation, or undo the damage to my ability to trust people. It might prevent her from victimizing other men, which was good, but it wouldn't change anything fundamental about my situation or my future. Some people might see her punishment as justice, but I saw it as just another consequence of choices that had already cost everyone involved more than could ever be repaired. The email did include information about other victims in her case. 3 other foreign men with stories remarkably similar to mine: lonely, recently divorced or widowed, financially comfortable, emotionally vulnerable. She'd run similar schemes with each of us simultaneously, using our properties and resources to build a criminal empire that spanned multiple provinces and involved dozens of employees. We'd all thought we were special, all believed we were the only ones, all imagined we'd found genuine love with a woman who saw us as nothing more than business opportunities. Today I'm 64 years old and living in a small flat in Aberdeen that I rent with my consulting income. I have enough money for basic expenses, but no savings, no property, no financial security for my retirement years. My relationship with my daughter has improved, but there's still an underlying disappointment in her eyes when she looks at me, a sense that I'm not the man she thought I was. My social life is limited to the support group and a few old colleagues who don't know the full extent of what happened in Thailand. I don't regret trying to find love again after my divorce. I don't even regret going to Thailand or taking risks in pursuit of happiness. What I regret is ignoring my instincts when they told me something was wrong, choosing hope over evidence and allowing loneliness to override common sense. I regret not recognizing that someone who seemed too good to be true probably was exactly that. Most of all, I regret that my desire to feel young and desirable again made me an easy target for someone who specialized in exploiting those exact emotions. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder what would have happened if I'd trusted my initial doubts about Warreni's story, if I'd investigated her background before buying the condo, if I'd kept my financial information private until I was certain about her intentions. But those thoughts lead nowhere productive. The past can't be changed and the future is what it is. I'm alive, I'm free, and I learned something important about the difference between love and performance, between genuine emotion and skilled manipulation. I share my story now because I want other men to understand how sophisticated these operations can be, how easily intelligent people can be deceived when their emotional needs are being met by someone who understands exactly how to exploit those needs. Warreni wasn't just a Thai woman looking for a foreign boyfriend. She was a criminal who studied her targets, identified their vulnerabilities, and executed a complex plan to extract maximum value while maintaining plausible deniability. The fact that I was educated, experienced, and generally careful with money didn't protect me, because she wasn't targeting my intellect or my business sense. She was targeting my loneliness, my desire for companionship, and my need to feel valued by someone who seemed to genuinely care about me. If you're an older man considering a relationship with a younger woman in Southeast Asia, I'm not telling you not to pursue love or companionship, but I am telling you to be smarter than I was. Keep your finances separate. Don't give anyone access to your money or property until you're absolutely certain about their intentions. Don't ignore red flags because you want the relationship to work. And remember that if someone seems too perfect, if they tell you exactly what you want to hear, if they need your help with money or legal problems, you might be dealing with a professional who's done this many times before. I thought I was buying love in Thailand. Turns out I was just renting out my own heartbreak by the hour. The difference between those two things cost me everything I'd spent 40 years building. Learn from my mistake. Don't let loneliness make you stupid the way it made me stupid. Love is worth pursuing, but not at the cost of your security, your dignity, and your future.